AI. It's everywhere, right?
Right.
Recommend what we should watch next, keeping our inboxes free of spam. But you know what? It might even be like helping to decide who gets that dream job or that loan they really need. But what happens when the algorithms, the things that make all that stuff work, what happens when they start like playing favorites?
Hmm. Interesting question.
Yeah, today we're going deep on algorithmic bias.
Yeah.
We've got all this research, real world examples, the whole 9 yards. We're going to see how much this impacts you.
A lot of people don't realize this, but even with the best intentions, AI can, it can inherit and then amplify existing biases.
Oh, wow.
And for brands, this can be, a real PR nightmare.
Yeah, totally. So let's break it down. Okay, so trust is obviously super important for brands. Everyone knows that. But where does this whole AI bias thing fit in?
It all boils down to this. People are way more aware of social justice issues these days, and they're putting their money where their mouth is,
Yeah.
supporting brands that, actually align with their values.
Right.
If a company gets a reputation for, like, biased AI,
Uh-oh.
yeah, it's a deal breaker. It can really turn customers away.
So it's not just about doing the right thing, it's doing the smart thing, business-wise.
Exactly.
Now, our sources, they go into some pretty crazy examples of AI bias, like in action. What are some that really stood out to you?
Well, the impact on hiring and loan applications, that's really alarming.
Yeah, for sure.
There have been cases where AI systems were straight up discriminating against women or people from certain backgrounds, even when their qualifications were identical.
No way. So you're saying people are losing out on real opportunities just because an algorithm is messed up?
It's more common than you think.
Wow, that's heavy. But how does this even happen? How does this bias sneak into AI in the first place? Is it like, are people intentionally programming, prejudice into the code?
Thankfully, no, it's very rarely that intentional. But think of it this way. If you only ever show a child pictures of red apples, they're probably going to be pretty surprised the first time they see a green apple.
Yeah, okay. See where you're going with this.
Well, AI is kind of similar. It learns from the data it's fed.
So if the data itself is biased, the AI just absorbs that, basically.
Yep, exactly. Imagine an AI that's learning from historical hiring data, let's say from a time when women were rarely promoted.
Hmm.
That AI might then unfairly favor men for promotions in the future, even if the company's culture has totally changed.
That's kind of scary, It's like those biases from the past are like coming back to haunt us through technology.
It's a real concern.
Are there any other ways this bias can creep in?
Oh, absolutely. One big issue is unrepresentative data. Let's say you've got facial recognition AI, and it's trained mostly on images of light-skinned faces.
Right.
Well, it might struggle to accurately identify people with darker skin tones.
Oh, so it's not just about the data being biased.
Right.
It's about who's actually in the data, right? Or who's missing.
Exactly. And it gets even more complicated. Even the choices that developers make when they're designing the AI, even those can unintentionally introduce bias.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, think about how they define success for the AI. Let's say you're designing an AI for loan applications.
Okay.
And you program it to, minimize loan defaults. Sounds reasonable on the surface.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right. But here's the thing. That AI might end up prioritizing applicants with high credit scores and stable incomes. That could really disadvantage people who are just starting out or have had, financial struggles, even if they're perfectly capable of repaying the loan.
So even with good intentions, it can backfire. It's like on one hand, we're trying to fight those ingrained biases, and then we accidentally build them right back into our technology.
Exactly.
It's a tough situation.
It is, and that's exactly why talking about ethical AI is so important. It's not just a tech problem, it's a societal one.
For sure. It's about like recognizing that these algorithms, they don't exist in a vacuum, right? They reflect our choices, our values.
Exactly.
Okay, so before we go too deep into that, I've got to know, how does social media play into all this? Our sources mention it can like really amplify the problems of AI bias.
Yeah, social media is a real double-edged sword here.
Interesting.
On the one hand, it can expose those problematic AI practices, stuff that might have flown under the radar otherwise.
Right.
But on the other hand, It can blow those controversies way out of proportion. It can create huge PR nightmares for companies.
So, like, one viral incident of AI bias can completely ruin a company's reputation, even for a huge company.
Absolutely. Think about the backlash against some facial recognition technologies, the ones that were showing racial bias.
Yeah.
Those stories went viral, led to boycotts, bad press, even lawsuits,
Wow.
all because of a few biased algorithms.
It's like, in the age of social media, companies don't really get a second chance, do they? So what happens to those companies? Do they ever recover?
Some do. But it's a long and expensive road.
I bet.
And it usually involves a complete overhaul of how they develop AI. But even then, that damage to their reputation can stick around for years.
That's wild. So it's not just about cleaning up the mess afterward. It's about stopping those disasters before they even happen.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the big question. What can companies actually do to make their AI more ethical?
Well, there are 5 key strategies our sources highlight.
Okay.
But we should start with the foundation of it all. Understanding how much trust matters in the market today.
So you're saying that getting this right isn't just about, like, avoiding bad PR. It's actually a good move for the business itself.
It's both. In a world where consumers have so many choices, trust can make or break a company. Building ethical AI helps make sure your company's, on the right side of that equation.
Okay, so ethical AI. Good for business, good for the world. But how do we actually make it happen? That's what we'll find out when we come back.
Okay, so those 5 strategies. First up, diverse data sets. We've got to make sure the data we're using to train the AI, well, it has to represent the real world, all the diversity out there.
So no more just feeding the AI this, like, narrow view of reality and expecting it to make good decisions for everyone.
Right, exactly. Think about it like a jury. You want people on a jury that represent the community, right?
Yeah.
Same idea with AI. If we want it to be fair, it's got to learn from data that represents everyone.
Makes sense. But even with diverse data, how can we be sure that the AI isn't still, like, picking up on those hidden biases? That's where the bias audits come in, right?
Exactly. Think of bias audits like regular checkups.
Yeah.
For your AI. You go through the algorithm really carefully, looking for anything that seems unfair or discriminatory.
So are we talking about people actually, like, reading lines of code or other tools that can help with that?
Well, it can be both. There are definitely tools and techniques to analyze algorithms.
Right.
But human expertise, that's still crucial. It's like a detective, investigating a case.
Right.
They might use all those fancy forensic tools, but they also need their own knowledge, their experience, to put the pieces together and find those hidden clues.
Okay, so bias audits are like having a detective on the case.
Yeah.
Making sure the AI is playing by the rules. What happens if they find something off?
That's where transparency comes in. If an audit finds bias, the company needs to be upfront about it. Explain what happened, how they're fixing it, and how they'll make sure it doesn't happen again.
So it's not just about fixing it. It's about being open with people about what happened.
Yeah.
But what does that look like in the real world? Is it just like putting a statement on their website or something?
Transparency has to go further than that. It's about making the AI's decisions, understandable to the people those decisions affect. Think about it. If you were denied a loan, wouldn't you want to know why?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It would be so frustrating to just get a rejection with no explanation. So are you saying companies should just, like, show everyone their whole algorithm?
Not necessarily the whole thing. That could be super complicated, and usually it's, confidential business information.
Right.
But there's this big push for explainable AI, which means designing systems that can, give clear reasons for their decisions.
So instead of just getting it yes or no, you get an explanation for why.
Exactly. And that can be really helpful even if you don't get the answer you wanted. At least you know why, and maybe you can, try to improve your chances next time.
That's really interesting. But even with diverse data, audits, and explainable AI,
Yeah.
we still have to consider the human side of things, right? How do we make sure the people building these systems are coming at it with the right approach?
Well, that's where inclusive development teams come in, having people from different backgrounds, different experiences, all involved in every step of building the AI.
Yeah, because if everyone on the team looks and thinks the same way, they're going to miss things, right? They might not even realize they're introducing bias.
Exactly. A diverse team is more likely to catch those potential biases that could impact different groups. They can ask the tough questions, challenge each other, and make sure the solutions work for everyone.
It's like having a built-in ethics committee right there on the team. But even with all that, I'm still thinking about the company culture as a whole. Does that have an impact on all of this?
Absolutely. It's a huge factor. And that brings us to the last strategy, ethical leadership. It's about creating a culture where fairness and inclusivity are, at the top of the list.
So it's not just having good policies, it's about putting them into practice every day.
Right. Ethical leadership means setting the right tone, from the top down, making sure that ethical AI isn't just something you check off a list. It's a core part of how the company operates.
That sounds great in theory, but how do you actually do that? You
Oh.
can't just like snap your fingers and suddenly everyone's an ethics expert.
It takes work and it takes time. And it takes a real commitment from leadership. It's about training, resources, open communication, and rewarding ethical behavior. And maybe most importantly, it's about holding people accountable when they mess up.
So you're building a culture where people feel like they can speak up if something isn't right, even if it means like challenging the way things are usually done.
Mm-hmm.
How does all this actually work in the real world? Are there companies out there getting this right?
There are definitely some encouraging examples. Take healthcare, for instance.
Okay.
There's been a lot of focus on making sure that the AI used for, diagnosis and treatment is trained on data that represents all kinds of patients, different races, genders, backgrounds, everything.
So doctors can feel more confident that the AI is actually accurate no matter who their patient is.
Exactly. And then there's the financial world. Some companies are using AI to help people who have, low credit scores to get access to loans that are fair and affordable.
Wow, that's really cool. So AI can actually help level the playing field instead of making those inequalities worse.
That's the goal.
I'm sure not every company is getting this right, though. What are some red flags, signs that a company might not be taking ethical AI seriously?
One big red flag is a lack of transparency.
Okay.
If a company doesn't want to talk about its AI, or they use a lot of vague words like fairness without actually explaining what that means, that's definitely a warning sign.
So it's like they're hiding something, or maybe they don't even realize the potential for bias. What else should we be on the lookout for?
Lack of diversity, both in leadership and in the AI development teams. If everyone at the top looks and thinks the same, they're less likely to spot those biases that could affect people who are different from them.
Right. It's like that saying, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Yeah.
If marginalized groups aren't part of the process, their needs and perspectives are going to be overlooked. But let's go back to the positive for a second. Can you give us some specific examples of those explainable AI systems? I'm curious to see how those actually work.
There's some really interesting stuff happening, like in the criminal justice system. Some places are using AI to help judges make sentencing decisions.
That's a big one.
But instead of just, spitting out a number, these systems explain the factors that went into the decision. Things like the person's criminal history, how serious the crime was, all those details.
So the AI gives a reason for its suggestion, not just a random decision.
Exactly. And that lets the judge really weigh the evidence, consider any potential biases, and make a more informed and hopefully more fair decision. It's not about AI replacing human judgment. It's about giving humans better information.
That's a good way to put it. It's not about AI versus humans. It's about using AI to help humans do their jobs better.
Exactly. And that's really the key takeaway here. Ethical AI isn't just about avoiding harm. It's about using technology to make the world a better, fairer place. It's about giving people more power, hearing voices that are usually silenced, and making sure everyone has a chance to succeed.
That's a great goal. But before we get too idealistic, let's talk about the impact that AI bias is having on people right now. Because it's not just about numbers and data. It's about real people being affected by these decisions.
Absolutely. Let's look at some specific examples, how AI bias is playing out in different areas and what it means for the people who are interacting with these systems every day.
We've been talking about the strategies for building ethical AI, but it's easy to get lost in the weeds.
Oh, yeah.
Let's bring it back to, real people. What are some real-world examples of this AI bias actually impacting people's lives?
You're right. We can't forget that there are real people on the other side of these algorithms. Take AI hiring systems, for example.
Okay.
There have been some cases where these systems were, they were penalizing candidates just because of their gender, their race, even their name.
Seriously. Just for having a name that sounds a little different.
Yeah, there was this one case that got a lot of attention where an AI hiring tool was downgrading resumes from women, and the reason, they'd gone to women's colleges.
It's like the AI was stuck in the past, totally missing out on these qualified candidates. How does that even happen?
It often comes down to, those hidden biases in the data we talked about. Even if the company's trying to do the right thing, if the AI is learning from data that reflects old inequalities, it can end up repeating those biases.
So what can someone do if they think they've been treated unfairly by one of these systems? Like, is there any way to fight back?
That's why transparency and explainability are so important. People have a right to know how these decisions are made, and if they think they've been treated unfairly, they can challenge it.
But isn't that a losing battle? Like going up against a huge corporation, they have all the lawyers and resources.
It's tough, but it's not impossible. There are organizations out there fighting algorithmic bias, and we're seeing new legal decisions all the time. And, public opinion can make a big difference.
So you're saying social media can actually be a good thing here?
Absolutely. When people share their stories and raise awareness about these problems, it puts pressure on companies to be more accountable. Remember that story about the facial recognition technology that had racial bias?
Yeah.
That public outcry, it really forced the industry to make some changes.
Okay, so hiring's one area where this is a problem. What about other parts of our lives?
Oh, the financial world is another big one. The algorithms they use for approving loans, credit scoring, even insurance rates, all of that. It can really make existing inequalities worse if we're not careful.
So like someone could get denied for a loan or they have to pay a higher interest rate just because of their zip code or their last name.
Exactly. And it can create this vicious cycle. People from marginalized communities get denied opportunities, and that just reinforces the inequalities, making it even harder to, get ahead.
It's like these algorithms are baking inequality into the system, even if no one's doing it on purpose.
That's the risk, and we have to be aware of it. AI has so much potential to do good, but if we're not careful, it can also make things worse. The responsibility's on everyone, the companies building these systems, and the people using them.
So what can our listeners do? How can they be, more informed and empowered when it comes to all these algorithms?
Well, first of all, stay informed. There are some amazing groups and researchers out there, people who are dedicated to understanding and fixing this problem. Support their work, follow their research, and spread the word.
Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah,
The more we know about how these systems work, the better we'll be at spotting problems and demanding better solutions.
exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions. When you're using an AI-powered system, ask about their bias policies, where they get their data, how diverse their teams are, hold them accountable.
So it's about being an active participant, not just, blindly going along with whatever the algorithm says. But it can feel kind of overwhelming. Where do you even start? What's one thing our listeners can do, like today, to make a difference?
Pay attention to the products and services you use every day. Do a little research on those companies. Are they transparent about their AI? Are they actually trying to reduce bias? Your choices have an impact.
It's like voting with your dollars.
Yeah. Support the companies doing the right thing and hold the others accountable.
I like that. Well, this has been a really insightful look at AI bias, and I hope our listeners feel like they can make a difference. Remember, stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking those tough questions.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's it for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.